everyone. I'd like to call the meeting for the January 21st, 2020 school committee meeting to order. Please silence all cell phones for the duration of the meeting. If you do need to have any sidebar conversation, I just ask that you please go out in the hallway. All right, we'll start off with a Pledge of Allegiance. We'll stand. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Can I have an approval of minutes, payroll, and warrants? I'd like to have a motion to approve the minutes for December 10th, 2019.
Motion?
Do I have a second?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay. And can I have a motion to approve all payroll and warrants?
Motion to approve.
Do I have a second?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay, thank you. All right, regarding delegation, first I'd just like to say thank you everyone for showing up. We do offer a public comment section for delegation. I do ask that we try to limit it to items that are on the agenda if appropriate. I'll give you 3 minutes to speak if there's anyone that would like to address the committee. Mrs. Gomes, if anyone would like to address us, I ask that you take time first. Although we are a public meeting, we are in public, we're not public meeting, but I do allow for time for delegation. So speak your name, and if there's any discussions regarding personnel matters or individual members of the community, then I would ask that you go through administration. All right, so would anyone like to address the committee tonight? Nope? Okay. All right, thank you very much. So we will move to old business, which we don't have any. So we're moving right along, on to new business. Superintendent's report, Dr. Bailey.
Okay, first up, we have the Executive Director, Catherine Cooper, with us tonight from SMEC. And I know she's been making the rounds to all of her member districts. I did include in your packet what she's going to discuss tonight for background, but I would like to call her up to the podium and she'll give us, I believe we have to do a vote on this.
Yes.
Thank you. Good evening, everyone. Thank you for including me on the agenda this evening. Most SMEC business can be voted by our board of directors. Mrs. Gomes is our Acushnet representative, but there are certain items that also have to be voted by our member school committees. You have 2 such items on your agenda for this evening. We are amending our Articles of Agreement. That's our governing document that all of the school committees have signed on to. Fall River Public Schools has requested membership at SMEC, so that would require a vote of the school committees and an amendment to the Articles of Agreement. Since I'm amending the Articles of Agreement, I did change a couple of other language items in here, mainly for clarification. They don't change the content of the document, they just make it a little more clear. So the main change is to include the Fall River Public Schools as a member district, and that would become, if the school committees vote to approve that and the commissioner signs off on it, Commissioner of the Department of Elementary and Secondary Education, it would become effective on July 1st. So that would be one item that I would be requesting your approval. And the other one is an amendment to the SMEC Capital Reserve Account. We developed a reserve account for capital funds, capital purchases or capital repairs in 2015. That also came before the Acushnet School Committee and all of our member districts at the time. If that is amended, again, we have to request that not only our board but the school committees approve the amendment. At this time, we are requesting an amendment to increase the maximum balance of that account from $250,000 to $500,000. We do not have $250,000 in there. We don't have even half of that. I think we have $100,000 right now. But based on some growth and the need to acquire more property and also to be able to maintain and repair properties that we have, we're looking to hopefully set aside some funds to do those things. Collaboratives are not eligible for MSBA funding, and we're not eligible for the facilities aid that charter schools get. We're on our own when it comes to space for our programs. So we have rented some fairly old buildings. We rent the Trip School building in Fairhaven, if any of you are familiar with that. As far as I know you are. It's over 100 years old and it needs a lot of love. So the other amendment to this, in addition to the account balance, maximum account balance, would be to allow our board to use those funds to address any needs at a long-term leased property in addition to the one building that SMEC owns. The way it was originally worded, we can only use it for the building that we own and for vans. So I would ask for your approval on these two amendments, but I'm happy to answer any questions.
So does anyone have any questions first? All right, so we'll go to a vote. All right, so can I have a motion to approve the amendments to the SMEC's Articles of Agreement and Capital Reserve Policy as submitted?
Motion?
Do you have a second?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, you're all set?
All right, thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. The next thing I have is personnel matters. You have the report in front of you. Since the last time we met, we've hired 3 new staff members, including a cafeteria worker, a nurse at the elementary school, who will begin her duties at the end of the month, and a special ed teacher here at Ford Middle School. We've had 3 resignations, facilities director, paraprofessional, and a K-2 resource room teacher, and 1 retirement. As you know, Principal Beck is retiring at the end of this school year. So, do you have any questions about that?
Any questions?
Okay. So the next thing I have is similar to last year. We did my middle of the year evaluation or check-in in January, so I wanted to let you know where I was. So in your packet, I included the original template that I gave you at the beginning of the year, and I'll go through each of the 4 goals as to the progress that we're making so far in the district. I'm particularly going to highlight goal 1 and 3, because 2 and 4, which I will highlight very briefly, very similar stuff of what we did last year. But goal number 1 talks about conducting a curriculum assessment audit and to ensure alignment to curriculum frameworks and the rigor of MCAS. And you'll be hearing tonight from Dr. Roy. She's going to be presenting the curriculum audit that was recently completed here at Ford Middle School. So I'm going to save a lot of my comments for that for later. And now she is beginning, or we're beginning, to look at the elementary school in terms of curriculum audit. So we've posted the director, and just some other progress that we've made, we've posted the director of curriculum instruction and assessment. We continue to work with Dr. Roy because we don't have a full-time curriculum person right now at looking at curriculum. We're looking at things like Curate from DESE, which is the teacher ratings and the research-based curriculum programs. We've had different pilots going on at the Ford Middle School. This curriculum audit, you will see after tonight's presentation, we will begin talking about next steps, but it's very important that the teachers are involved in those next steps. And again, I'm going to keep my comments brief for the moment, and then I'll probably chime in when we really get into the presentation tonight on the audit. If you go, and then, of course, as you know, we have the district's one-page strategy. We're going to be doing some action plan with that. We continue to monitor and encourage collaboration within the district, although I'm still thinking it's not enough for teachers. We need more of it. So really taking a deep dive and looking at schedules for next year and trying to get our teachers as much planning time as possible, because it's really important. The second goal talks about the NSIP program. And everything I do in that program is really related to all of the goals. I mean, it's basically to build my capacity as a superintendent. So similar to last year, I work with a coach who comes into the district once a month. I go to the monthly sessions, the PD sessions. We have a lot of PD that is part of this program, as you know, through MASS. There's joint conferences with MASS and MASC. We've actually done one together as a school committee and myself with Jim Hardy. That's the type of things that we're going to continue to do together. PD, working with the principals on their professional development in the district and making sure that it's aligned with our strategy that we talked about at a couple of meetings ago. You see, I've listed all my professional conferences and meetings that I've attended. I attend a monthly regional superintendent's meeting, and that's monthly. and it's great networking, and we talk about similar issues going on in the different districts within the state and the region. So that's that one. And then I wanted to really highlight the third one, which is a little bit different than what we've been doing. It's identifying a consistent approach regarding teaming and systems as the district works to create thriving social and emotional learning experiences for all students within the Acushnet Public Schools. And it's around that whole notion of 2 schools, 1 district. Originally, we thought we wanted to get some building-based teams in our schools, but what we really decided to do was establish a district-wide team that can work in both schools so that we can get that consistent approach going. So that team consists of school adjustment counselors, guidance counselors, school psychologists, and they're actually providing SEL curriculum within the classroom to all students this year. And some of those topics that children have been exposed to are mindfulness, depression, emotions, and healthy friendships. So we will continue to do those things. They've also established small and individual social skills groups. And this clinical team meets monthly with our Director of Student Services to review the information, to do a case review, and review data as appropriate. We are continuing with responsive classroom and PBIS within the district as it currently exists, and I think you'll hear more about that at the end of the year when the principals probably do a summary. Like, for example, I believe the Ford Meadow School is looking to do a school store as an incentive, things like that. They had a concert recently as a reward for the students. Our Wellness and Bullying Prevention Committee, which has been going really well. We've met several times this school year, which the dates are listed there. And we've established a Google Drive to share the information and next steps. And some of the activities that have been going on with this group is they've worked on establishing the MARC presentations on anti-bullying at each school, which the MARC program is the Massachusetts Aggression Reduction Center through Bridgewater State University. Something as simple as, there was a concern about our students sitting on the buses in the morning for, longer than probably what they needed to, so we looked at changing some of those bus times in the morning. That's been done. But it's just been a nice way of communicating with the whole group through the Google Drive in between meetings, so people, they even have the agendas, posted for the March and May meeting, and people are adding to that, so it's been good. The district's clinical team has also had the opportunity to attend more targeted and focused PD, especially in the areas of the SEL, social emotional learning. And this is enhanced, they're working on team goals together. And I've listed some of the examples of some of the things that the PD that they've done this year. So again, I mentioned this earlier, but in lieu of the building-based teams, we wanted to provide consistency within the district. So in addition to the counselors, the guidance counselors, the school adjustment counselors, the school psychologists, we added the BCBA, which is the Board Certified Behavior Analysis, speech therapists, and occupational therapists as part of a team to work on data collection, to create a training module for the staff in both schools, and that's part of their team goal. So they've been doing a really nice job of working together. And, one might wonder, well, why is the speech therapist in that group? Well, they're working on social language and pragmatics, and the OT is working on things like sensory, if that is an issue or a challenge for a student. So really addressing the needs of the whole child. We've also been looking at the district attendance campaign, and that is ongoing. But as we began to look at it, we really had to take a step back. Prior to doing the campaign, we really needed to analyze the data and set up some strategies for intervention for some of our kids who are chronically absent. So there's been a lot of discussion and bringing in families around that. And at the same time, for all students, we want to continue to emphasize the importance of being in school each and every day unless they're sick. But it's really important to be in school. And that's a goal for the district because for the last 2 years, our district's been penalized for attendance, our overall attendance. So that's something that I know the principals are working really hard with the staff. And just again, we continue to work with community partners in all these areas. We've also started working with the Children's Advocacy Center, And again, that's just to further increase our knowledge base for our clinical team and for everybody as some of these issues arise. And then the fourth one, you've heard me talk about it before, and that is regarding strengthening the human resources systems and procedures within the Acushnet Public Schools. So just to highlight that, we've created a new system for hiring staff, and I've actually included a document in your packet just to give you an example of what that looks like. Principals and department heads have continuously been trained on the expectations of hiring people. Checking, for example, checking 3 references of supervisors, the forms that we use, we're checking to be sure that their licenses are valid, that we receive all the verification of employment, official college transcripts. So we've really tightened that up. We've also looked at job descriptions, and you've had a few job descriptions come before you over several months, so those are listed. We're looking at a new substitute one, which will be coming in front of you probably next month. And we continue to utilize curriculum meetings right now to review the ed evaluation process with administrators. That's been ongoing, which that's a similar issue that came up last year. So again, I wanted to highlight this. I think we're doing a lot of work in the district. I think people are working really hard, the teachers, the administrators, everybody, the support staff. I can't say enough, and even things that are not part of this mid-year, things are constantly going on. Even this weekend, we had staff in, about the snow and making sure that it wasn't going to be icy when the kids came back to school today. But there's a lot of behind-the-scenes things going on, and I couldn't be more proud to work in Acushnet with a great team that we have. So I don't know if anybody has any questions.
Does anyone have any questions? No. No? That was great. Thank you.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
Thank you.
So we'll do the similar thing. It's going to be March or April. March or April. I'll be getting all the forms to you again. Everybody will do an individual evaluation. It'll be compiled by Mrs. Benavides, and then it will go through the chair, and it will be presented the following month.
Yep.
Okay?
I'm thinking probably March, whereas we meet in April, and then town meeting, I think, is May 16th.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Okay, so this, again, I kept my comments brief about the curriculum audit, but I just have to say that hours and hours of work has gone into this curriculum audit so far, and it's a lot of information, and you're getting pieces of it tonight. What we gave you in your packet is the background information. We have a PowerPoint presentation that you'll see tonight, and Dr. Roy will be presenting that. So at this time, I would like to call Dr. Roy to the podium, and I just really need to stress that this audit, I'm sure that you're going to highlight these things, but I'd like for you to talk about the aggregate data, how this is not focused on any one teacher, because it's really sometimes easy in small schools to identify data associated with this teacher, that teacher. This is not what this is about. This is not about the teaching practices. This is more about the curriculum resources that we are utilizing. So, I mean, we've done a huge collection of asking teachers for their assessments. What does it look like? What are you testing the kids on? The work, student work. All of that has been compiled, and Dr. Roy will actually explain to you how this audit was done, but it's very thorough. And now that Ford Middle School is done, I think I'll talk on the other end of her presentation, but we're moving forward with the elementary school at this time. So we're keeping to the timeline, which has been great. So thank you, Dr. Roy.
Okay, just a little background on what I did in cooperation with the middle school. I collected as many assessments as I could get my hands on for math, science, and ELA, as well as some core resources they may be using. So I analyzed like every single item of every single assessment to kind of understand the rigor and how it's aligned with MCAS. And as well as, so that data source, I have assessments, I have curricular resources, and then I did a teacher survey, and that was actually quite helpful for me to make sense of what I was seeing. So with that, just a little bit of background again. When I was with you all.
1 second.
Yeah.
I may have forgotten to put this in your packet.
That's okay. We'll turn
Oh,
on.
okay, but
Okay.
might want to
Oh,
follow.
sorry, yes. So, just as a background, in the fall, when you had me present the data from MCAS, we were looking at the data and wondering a couple of things. It was, this is Ford Middle School data, so the not meeting expectations is really strong, right? You guys are doing a great job in the percentage of kids that are not meeting expectations. But then we sort of noticed that exceeding was more stagnant and not as quite as strong as the state. And that led to, at the end of that presentation, one of the questions that came up would be, so, what next? And one of the things we said, well, I'd like to, let's take a look at the curriculum and the assessments, not the teaching. This is not about what's happening in the classroom. This is about the tools that we give teachers, that teachers are using. I mean, the reality is teachers can only be effective as the tools that they have in front of them. So this was a chance to sort of gather those tools and see how they're aligning with the expectations that kids are being held to. So the way I did this work was really, there was two overarching criteria. We looked at the rigor of assessments, and in the full report that I gave you, you have lots of detail on something called Webb's depth of knowledge applied to the Common Core, looking at the level of rigor of task. And then the second overarching objective is just looking at the quality, the high quality resources. And there's really some nice tools out there to help you evaluate the quality of curricular resources. There's something called Ed Reports, which is looking, and it's a national nonprofit that is looking at the level of rigor of resources and how it's matching with really the Common Core state standards, which Massachusetts is based off. Massachusetts has its own version of that, the Curate project that the superintendent already mentioned. So those resources now, they weren't available a few years ago, so they really did help make sense of what's out there. So I talked about that. So in general, the rigor of assessment. So this is looking at end of unit assessments. You teach a unit on science, you give kids a test, right? The good old fashioned. How much does that look like MCAS? So this is what I was looking at. So if the Webb's depth of knowledge, you could basically put an item into one of those four categories. A DOK 1, depth of knowledge 1, is just sort of your recall and your reproduction. That's just procedures, definitions, you kind of know it, right? So DOK 2 is more about, there has to be some conceptual understanding around there, what they might call knowledge application. DOK 3 in general is now you're doing some like problem solving. It's a non-routine problem, so the complexity is getting a little bit harder. And then DOK 4, which is hard to measure in a traditional assessment test, so you're not going to see that for science or math, is your extending thinking. You might be designing your own experiment, right? So really sort of out of the box thinking, integration of knowledge kind of ideas. So if you just kind of keep that frame in mind, what I did is, I'm curious saying, well, what's the ratio in MCAS? Like, what are we seeing in MCAS in the release items? What does that look like? What percentage of our MCAS items in every content area is a DOK 1, 2, 3, or 4? And then what do our assessments look like? Now, all items, I'll preface this with, all kinds of items are important to have, but what does that ratio look like? And so, you probably don't want to go through this. This is you just trusting me that a DOK level 1 looks like that, a DOK level 2 might look like this one, and then it gets a little more complex, and this is math, a DOK level 3 math. It's you have this all in the report. So, but in general, when I looked at the math release items for the past 2 years from MCAS, because we have next generation MCAS questions now, so I looked at the past 2 years. On the left-hand side, in general, what I rated for MCAS release items for mathematics, you got about an even split between DOK 1, which is in blue, and DOK 2, which is in orange, right? It's pretty close, a fairly split, with a small percentage being those really rigorous DOK 3 problems. When I analyzed what was made available to me for the FMS, for Ford Middle School math, DOK knowledge, when I analyzed those items, right, you see a different picture. You do see all 3 item types, and they're all important, but there was a bigger tendency for DOK 1s at FMS than DOK 2s or 3s, right? So the ratio, it's about double DOK 1 to DOK 2, where for MCAS, it's about an even split. So there's a bit of a discrepancy there. Okay. So the next one I'm showing you is science, sort of the same old thing. I have some samples of DOK level 1s, like a definition. DOK level 2, you got to understand some concepts, more of a scientific concept. DOK level 3, and this one, there's a bigger explanation. You're designing your own composter and what that would look like, right? So it's a little bit of a deeper thinking. Again, when I do the analysis for MCAS, what I was seeing, and this is all grade levels, right? We're putting all grade levels together, by the way, for math, and for science, this would be 5 and 8. So what I'm seeing is that a DOK 2 is about 65%, and to the DOK 1, about 22%, right? So they're almost like this 3-to-1 ratio. And then 13% of the problems really fit that high-level DOK 3. Again, so when you look at FMS science, not quite the same. It's more of an even split between DOK 1 and 2 and a smaller percentage of DOK 3. So again, all 3 items are important, but the relative ratio of kids are being asked to do and held accountable for and expected in order to be sort of ready for the next year, there's a little bit of a difference between what we're seeing. Here's the ELA examples. And for ELA, because of the rubric that's in your packet, I was able to so-called get a DOK 4. That would be for your ELA folks out there when they're analyzing paired selections. You have a question about 2 different texts. Kids have to read 2 different, say, passages and then answer a question about that. That's considered a very high-level skill for kids, so that's like a DOK 4. So when you look at these ratios for ELA, for MCAS, if we just go to that DOK 4 level, like 18%, there's a lot of those paired passage, looking across different passages and asking questions about those text-based questions. For Ford Middle School, they were there, but there's only about 5% of them, right? So again, that ratio seems to be a little bit off, as well as for DOK 1, for MCAS, small, not many. There's not many right there questions. Kids have to do a lot of thinking, a lot of analyzing of text to find a lot of inference of text. Everything is text-based. And then you see on the Ford Middle School side, there's a lot more of those other questions. Okay, so in general, what's also was really important, so what are the teachers telling me, right? So what were the teachers saying about their assessment practices? I asked, one of the questions is, what's the primary resource you use to create assessments? And I mean, you can see the answers on the slide. There's a lot. There's sort of a lot of different resources people are using. There isn't just a 1 or 2 primary resources that folks would be using for any of the content areas to create those assessments. So you do have Galileo as a district, but I would tell you maybe only one person is saying that's their primary resource. Some might be pulling from the curriculum, some are creating their own, they're pulling from other online resources. The second question, in terms of collaboration, and I know Dr. Bailey already mentioned this idea of having, one of the goals is about getting more collaboration in there. How often do you collaborate with a colleague to create an assessment? The highest would be 4, the lowest you would be 1. And you see for ELA, I got a 2.2 average, for math a 1.5, and for science a 1. Now, the middle school structure, right, your small school, there's 1 teacher per grade level. So, and there was even a comment about a teacher, they feel like an island. I'm the 7th grade math teacher. I'm the only 7th grade math teacher. I can't go work with a colleague to write the curriculum, to create an assessment, right? So that is certainly a challenge that you have here, is that, the size of your school, it's a lot to ask an individual teacher to sort of write the assessment, create the curriculum, and then implement it. And the reality is, as you know, in larger districts, you've got teams of people doing this work. And then how might they improve the assessment system? You see in there some suggestions from staff, more time for collaboration, updated curriculum, district-wide assessments, more online resources. So there's lots of thoughts. They understand that, they would like more consistency and more time to collaborate, but the structure right now is a challenge for you guys. Okay, so the curricular resources. And very complicated work to do this across 3 content areas. The rubrics from Curate and Ed Reports really helped me with this. To try to simplify this, if I can simplify this, is sort of 2 things that I pulled from the rubrics. Domain 1 is what you would almost consider the what of learning. Do you have the right standards? Did you cover all the topics? Are the texts rigorous? Is the scope and sequence there, right? Do you have the right stuff in there, or are there holes? That's kind of domain 1, which is called what I call the what of learning. The other thing, though, all these reports are looking at is the how of learning. Are there high cognitive demand tasks? Are kids reasoning, problem solving, analyzing? Are they providing evidence from a text? Are they integrating ideas across content and looking at the science and engineering practices, right? It's the practices of the domain. That's how we learn, to be quite honest. That's that critical thinking piece. So these rubrics are looking at both of those things and analyzing curricular resources across both of them, right? So, for example, let's take math. So math is in flux right now because you used to use digits, is my understanding, and you're no longer using digits, and that's probably not that's probably a good idea because it's not rated very highly, and especially in terms of that how of learning. And so what my understanding is last year, the middle school team piloted a few programs. They just, at this point, have not made a decision on one. There isn't a curriculum coordinator, which we'll talk about later. So they also started to pilot something called Maneuvering the Middle that one of the teachers found. That one is not rated by Ed Reports or anywhere, so I rated a few lessons from there. And I would tell you it does a better job of the what of learning than the how of learning from the lessons that I analyzed trying to use those rubrics. So the math team right now, as you'll see, there's not a consistent resource necessarily that they're using. And they do know they are looking for something to be more consistent. Science, I believe, and again, if I'm incorrect, you can let me know this. Science is a bit in flux as there was a pilot for the FORCE kits. And the best I can tell you is that a piece of the FORCE did not meet expectations. And look, this is by no means to say any of this is a throwaway curriculum. You're never going to find the perfect curriculum. It's just that there's some things that it does very well, and some things perhaps it's not doing well. So in terms of science, you'd have to get really specific to this. And what I saw of the FOSS kit, yep, there were certainly some things that looked pretty good, but there are some pieces that you would need to beef up. And this one, what Ed Reports is telling us, is something about the phenomena that drives the instruction, sort of that looking at some real-world phenomena and then driving your science instruction based on that across lessons. That connects to kids' interests. It connects to their existing knowledge. That was a bit missing. That's basically what Ed Reports is trying to say. For ELA now, there was more consistency than in math and science. And in ELA, grade 5 is probably using Reading Street because the elementary school uses Reading Street. So I'll certainly spend more time on that when I do the elementary one. Reading Street does do a little better with the quality of text than the how of learning. That's true. But again, this is not what a teacher does with it. The teachers could take that resource and do a banged up job on that and implement everything it needs to. But the resources alone are not lending itself very well to this criteria. So the Prentice Hall textbook that 6, 7, and 8 seems to be using does seem to meet the expectation for the what of the learning. There's a lot of good stories in there, but there's a lot in there. There's a lot of work to do. As far as the questioning, the text-based evidence, and the writing, I would say it's more on the partial. So it has a little bit more work to do. Again, most importantly, what are the teachers saying? So as you see from the slide, the teachers, for the most part, are using different things right now because it's a little bit in flux. There isn't that one consistent core that everyone's pulling from to adapt their lessons from. And of course, given the structure, how often do they collaborate with a colleague to plan lessons? Not as frequently, I think, as everyone would hope, and probably as much as they would hope. And then how could you improve the curricular resources? So math definitely mentioned they are looking for that curriculum that they can all sort of dig their hands into that works for everyone vertically. Science, question about time for vertical alignment. Again, more core curriculum. ELA, you see it again, more planning time. And maybe some online resources that came up a couple of times, something that the kids can use online with them. So, I mean, in general, they're a little bit in flux, right? The inconsistencies between what MCAS is seeing and what they're using for practice, as well as the resources being a bit all over the place. Some of them are stronger than others. Some pieces are stronger than other. I think really speak to the direction you're moving in anyway. It really speaks to the need for a person to have a curriculum and assessment coordinator. I know you're hiring for that type of position and you haven't found that person, but when I was looking at the materials that people were sending me, you can see the strength in each of the teachers. I can see the strength in the 6th grade science or the 6th grade ELA and everything they were giving me. But what you don't see is there's no one harnessing that collective strength, right? No one's facilitating that work. The work you just mentioned with the SEL, where it's facilitated by your Director of Student Support Services, you could see how she's facilitating the expertise underneath her, and I think that's sort of what I'm seeing. So there's a lot of strengths everywhere, but it's everywhere, right? It's not in a way that is sort of focused and coherent. So, this last slide, once you kind of get that position in place, there does need to be work for each of the content areas to really understand the rigor and the focus of their domains. A lot has happened since the Common Core has come out. It keeps evolving. There's, the Common Core is meant to be about college-ready expectations, getting everybody ready for the road. And what each domain, what science or math or ELA or even social studies now, what it's emphasizing needs to be front and central, right? So we need to be focused on unpacking what those standards mean, what unpacking those assessments are, unpacking, is there new professional development that can help us better that? And this is not, it's not a one and done. It's not like you can just hire a consultant and they fix it and they leave. This is work that you do every year. Every year you're looking at your assessments. Every year you're looking at your curriculum and your lessons and you're tweaking it and you're getting better together, usually as a team, right? Because this is hard work for any one person to do. The consistency and alignment, you see the variety of resources that folks are using. Again, if you had someone harnessing that, that collective capacity, which is the collaboration, then the expertise is there, but it does need direction, and it does need direction in terms, again, of the priorities of those content domains. What science looking very differently now with the next generation science standards, right? And that's just always evolving, and you need people out there leading, facilitating, and pulling that expertise together. Okay.
Does anybody have any questions? I mean, this is sort of a common theme that we've started on last year with the alignment, and this is, it's coming from our staff, from our teaching staff. So we need to support them, and it's not as quick and easy as let's purchase a program. We want it to be rated high. Curate has teachers throughout the state rating this, they're using it, and if teachers are having success with it, we want to know about it. We don't want to spend a lot of money and reinvent the wheel. So we want to look at those programs, but we need our teachers' help, possibly I appreciate the fact that Dr. Roy said, maybe we need to step back this year and really start unpacking our standards so that when a curriculum director does come on board, our teachers are ready to go with the new program, really have that solid understanding of the standards. And that's a good focus, I think, for us this year, based on Ford Middle School, and I know we'll have some other results from the elementary school. And I definitely agree that we need to start looking at and being creative about ways that we can allow our teachers to collaborate, because it's so important. It's like, nobody works in isolation nowadays with any field, so it's really hard for people to have that weight on them, the assessments, the teaching every day, everything. We do need someone to steer the ship in terms of curriculum. And like I said, we've made some progress. We have posted for that position again, but we want to find the right person and the right match. So I'm really hopeful for that this year.
Excellent. That was great data. Thank you.
Very good.
Any questions at all?
No, thank you for putting it in terms that I can understand. I'm not an educator.
There's a lot to this. It's very meaty. Like that report that is included in your packet, there's a lot
made
to it.
sense. That was very clear. It was great.
Okay, and I think the next thing to do is really download this to our staff and share this data so that everyone understands where we're at, because this isn't about, the teaching per se, this is about the resources they have. So my goal would be for our teachers to really understand the what and the how, and then pick a program instead of picking a program, really making sure we know what we're looking for. So the goal would be, hopefully we can coordinate with the administration from this building and get that going this year. So,
Do you see improvement once we get a curriculum director, like at this time next year, and then progress again the following year? Or do you think that we'll have another maybe low year of progression with this?
I think we're always going to see progress. We just have to prioritize as a team. So, for example, we have definitely prioritized that math is a priority at the middle school because digits is no longer being used and they don't have anything. So we can't do it all at once, and it's foolish to try to do it all in one year, all these adoptions, where the district is behind in the content areas. So we have to be really thoughtful about it. Maybe we look at math at the middle school this year, which we started that work last year. But, we want to make sure we're spending this money appropriately. Too many districts oftentimes will spend the money on programs, and then they figure out a couple of years later, this is not working. So I like the fact that we're looking at ed reports, we're looking at Curate, and I want our teachers to get out there into possibly some other districts to say, if this is one that we're leaning towards, I'd love for you to go talk to another teacher, another colleague in another district to see how it's working. Because it's going to look different and it's going to feel different, but sometimes talking to another colleague who has gone through that change over to a new program makes it a little bit easier for them to digest. So it's a work in progress. These issues didn't happen overnight in Acushnet, and they're not going to be fixed overnight, but I think if, as a collective team, and that includes all of our teaching staff, if we can figure out what is the priority at each building, and then be realistic about, okay, what can we do this year? What's the short-term goal versus the long-term goal? And I think I've outlined a little bit at Ford Middle School, talked to the principals about unpacking these standards, really having the educators understand the what and the how, so that we can be ready to pick something. And I'd love for the teachers to get out and see some of these programs that are rated high by teachers, by their colleagues throughout the state. So that's the goal here. It might look very different at the elementary school, but this is why we are taking a deep dive into this curriculum audit based on the data that we had presented back at the beginning of the year when the data came out. There's no blame here. It's very complex work that we do in schools. And just because Acushnet is small does not mean that we don't have the same complex issues and nuances that any district has in the Commonwealth. So we're facing many of the same things that other districts are facing. So that's where we're at.
Like you mentioned, just when the state decides like, oh, this is going to be our curriculum for science, they change it in 2 years.
That's
And they
right.
say, oh, now we're going to add more onto this grade level and, oh, less, you know, so that's why Fran says it's constantly, or Dr. Roy, it's constantly evolving because it's forever changing. The state is forever. And I love that about Massachusetts, that I feel like we're at the forefront of education, and we do, you know, across the country, we score very well in our education scores, but it's all constantly changing, which is why I think curriculum is such a big piece. It's such a big piece, because you can have the best teacher in the world, but, you know, you don't give them the tools that they need. I mean, they can only do so much with their own talent. You know, you can have a great softball player, but if you don't give her a good team, you know what I mean, teammates.
It's the
Can't
meat
do
and
it by
potatoes of what
yourself.
we do every day.
Yeah.
And we do need somebody leading that.
So I'm
It's the
excited.
most important work that we do in the school, so.
I'm just happy we're looking at it, and it's a
Right.
start, and
That's
it's
right.
it's a place to start. So I'm super excited. But this is like forever. Like, this should be at the forefront of, in my opinion, every year we should be talking about curriculum and and maybe this year it's math. I mean, we know math needs a program, but like you mentioned, we all need to dive down into what has changed since we've last really
Well,
looked
and the
at
thing
our
is, how do the teachers always know those changes? They're in the classroom every
Correct.
day. So it's too much for them with all of these changes every year to be responsible for every single thing.
Absolutely.
They need some support and guidance and resources, and that's my job and our job is to get that. But I need their help, and it's got to be a collective effort to get this going. So, you know, this deep dive, that's the first step, and then we will proceed as I've outlined tonight.
I think it's been the concern of the committee and as well as yourself. We've mentioned time and time again that, you know, our students can only do 8th grade once. So
Right.
the idea of moving forward and steadily, you know, as best we can is going to be the best for our students. So I appreciate all of this, and
Yeah.
hopefully we can start making differences soon.
Yeah, this is higher on our list, so this is exciting.
Yeah, and I'm not sure this has ever been done in Acushnet before, really looking at, you know, what are the teachers using for assessments? And there's nothing earth-shattering with what we saw tonight, because we know from last year that teachers were saying everyone's using something different. And we know that's been a concern. But I think what was really eye-opening tonight was the level of rigor that MCAS assesses our children and the level of rigor that we are assessing our children at. And there's a disconnect. So we want to fix that. So we can definitely look at doing this again, you know, just to see if we're closer. But we've got to start somewhere. I'm really excited to start the work with our staff and administrators and teachers.
Well,
So,
definitely keep us posted,
yes, definitely.
and thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Roy.
And thank you for the teachers who worked with Dr. Roy, because right?
Yeah,
That's where
I-
you got all the information from, so.
Absolutely. I want to
that's
say too,
important.
while Dr. Roy is here, we've been doing some work with the Fairhaven Public Schools. We have children now in 8th grade who are exposed to algebra, and they're getting some of that content so that they are ready. And our administrators and teachers have also worked with the department heads over at Fairhaven. We want to make sure, if we're sending kids to any high school, that they are ready if they want to take advanced courses. So we're getting samples of their assessments. We're definitely going to be sure that our kids are ready for that next step, which is the high school. So I just want to thank Dr. Roy and the principals and the teachers who have been involved in that, because it's been a lot of work this year, getting that up and running. So thank you.
All right. So now we are at Mrs. Flynn, Business Manager's Report, Mrs. Flynn.
Okay, thanks. You have some reports in your packet. I'll start with the budget update. You have the budget summary for fiscal '20, which is the year-to-date budget summary. And then you have the school committee budget update. And this is the one where I look at projecting any surpluses and deficits throughout the year. As you can see, I've added to it. Now that we're halfway through the fiscal year, we have a little bit more information. So you can see that the majority of the surplus is coming in from salaries, that unfilled director of curriculum position and an unfilled paraprofessional position. So that makes up about a little bit more than half of what the surplus is. As we said, some of those funds will need to be spent on the curriculum work that's been done, and you can see year to date what has been spent on consulting for curriculum and instruction. We also are needing to contract out for a school nurse at the elementary school for the time being, but again, that should come to an end when we have our full-time person on board next week. So you can see projecting approximately $10,000 that we needed to use for the school nurse to fill that vacancy for the last few months. The next level of surplus is coming in from tuition reimbursement. That, as you know, we've talked about this. By contract, we have to budget $28,000 for tuition reimbursement for approved courses for teachers and paraprofessionals. Year to date, only $8,672 has been requested by about 8 different teachers. So right now, that surplus is $19,328. And the deadline to have made the request was December 31st. So that number will stay pretty firm right there. We've received invoices from New Bedford High for the first of 2 invoices from New Bedford High and the first of 3 from Fairhaven High for the tuition. Based on these invoices, we're currently projecting a deficit in high school tuition of about $10,800. We'll be receiving the next round of invoices within the next month or so, and I anticipate that that deficit will probably be cleared, and there might be a little bit of a surplus because I am aware of some students who are not on our rosters anymore. In special education, if we don't use the budgeted amount from the special ed surplus fund, stabilization fund, which I'm not recommending at this time, we are currently anticipating a surplus, out-of-district surplus of $8,500, but as you know, that changes from week to week sometimes, depending. In transportation, we have an overall surplus of just under $18,000. And that's after bringing back the late bus. So we were able to bring back the late bus. Mostly that is because we don't have any McKinney-Vento students who require transportation. These are homeless students that may require transportation into or out of the district. We don't have any students riding private vans right now, and we had budgeted $34,000 for that based on experience over the past couple of years. So those funds will go to cover any deficits in foster student transportation, which we have. And then any deficits overall in any other transportation lines. Also, part of that surplus is we don't have any students who require a one-on-one monitor to ride the big bus. Every year we do budget some for monitors in case we do have a student who needs a monitor to access the big bus, and we haven't had to use that this year. So we do have that, and that'll offset it's actually almost a direct offset to the deficit in out-of-district transportation. And again, this can and will change over the course of the next couple of months. So we took a look at electricity. We've had some invoices through November, I believe. And right now, using that data, I'm projecting a deficit of just under $17,000. But that might change because we'll see what the savings from the light project brings at the elementary school. So that remains to be seen, but we should see some savings with that. Again, oil it's really too soon to project. We've only had 1 or 2 deliveries. Typically, we have 5 to 6. I do know that comparing the price per gallon that we paid last year compared to this year is up about 17 cents. On average, over the last 3 years, we've purchased about 20,383 gallons at AES and about 24,609 gallons at FMS. So that 17-cent increase will make a big swing from year to year, but we'll see. Also in your budget, I included the revolving fund balances. I try to do this once a year so you can see what our revolving fund balances are. So that document is in here. So you can see the list of the funds: school lunch, special ed circuit breaker, the Ford Middle School principals account, elementary school principals account, school building rental, non-resident tuition, full-day kindergarten, preschool tuition, and the special education reserve. So you can see there's a description of each fund, which we've gone over in the past, where the revenue's coming in from, where the expenses going out go to. The fund balance has a 6/30/19, so the closing year balance, and also the year-to-date fund balance for 12/31. Now, some of these that have big changes in revenues every month. December revenues hadn't been posted yet by the Treasurer's Department, so if it looks like it's a little bit smaller, it is because we might have our expenses for December posted, but not our revenues. For example, school lunch. We're taking in money every day from the cash register. We're paying out money every week for accounts payable, for payroll. those funds are up to date, the expenses, but we don't have the December revenue in here. So really, that's why the better look for funds like that is the fund balance as of 6/30. But that was 6 months ago, so I like to have something more current for you to look at too. So that's the revolving fund balances. So I also included the capital funds update. These are the funds that we've requested at town meeting over the past 2 years. What we have received, what we've carried over, and what's been expended, and the available budget. So we talked about the curriculum. Last year, for the first time, the town afforded us $50,000 to update our curriculum. So you can see that year-to-date, we spent just under $21,000. So right now, we have about $29,000 left. If we don't use that this year, that is still available to us for next year, I believe. Parking lot maintenance, we were approved for $20,000 this year. We carried over $11,000 from last year, so we have $31,000 available to us. And we hope in the springtime that we're going to be able to repair the driveway directly behind the central office, where it comes around the corner from the bus lot all the way up to the pump station, because that's the next level of need. And if there's anything left over from that, we're going to try to repair some potholes. And that's something that we'll look every year to add money to at town meeting, because that is something very needed. The rooftop condensers at the elementary school, we were given $30,000. When we quoted the project out, it came in at $18,900, so we have $11,100. Now, unfortunately, I can't use those. I asked if we could use them to start some of the work at the Ford Middle School, and we can't. But what we hope to do is just keep that money in reserve and then ask for less for Ford Middle School, because that money's already been appropriated. We just have to change it over to Ford Middle School, because we'll have to replace the rooftop condensers here at Ford like we did at the elementary school. Preventative maintenance for the roof. We were approved this year for $15,000. We had just under 36 left over from last year. And then we've spent just under 3, so right now we have available 48,000. Now, we will need to start spending some money for the MSBA roof project, which will be on the designer, which is the architect, and the owner's project manager. So I'm waiting on the proposal from the designer, and I do have a proposal for the owner's project manager, but it does look like the two of those together are going to be slightly more than what we have in that, so we'll have to go into the school building rental account to get that, to supplement that, to get that going. Right now, in the roof project, you'll see in my facilities update, we're just waiting for some documents to be signed by the town to go to the next step at the MSBA. So that will need to be done rather quickly, because we are on a definite timeline with them for their documents that need to be submitted. We had the server room air conditioning article, $6,000, and that still has not to be completed. We had thought that we were going to work with some of the town's maintenance workers, but they're pretty straight out, so we're just gonna go on our own and contract that out to put in air conditioning in the elementary school in the server room that houses all of our equipment. So that's a project that we're hoping to get done certainly before the warm weather. Technology upgrade, we received $25,000, and we spent about $1,700 so far, and so that money is available to purchase some needed technology. I know Mr. Oliver has already started purchasing some replacements for items that are needed to be upgraded. Fire and burglar alarm, we've spent so far $5,200 upgrading the intrusion alarm here at Ford Middle School. The one at the elementary school is complete. We're just waiting on some final invoices for that. And the fire alarm, we really need to take a good look at the plans, and the plans are lacking, as is the theme for everything from the building construction over 17 years ago. So we really need someone, an architect or someone who specializes in that, to design the system. I can assure you the system is functioning, the fire alarms are working. We just wanted to upgrade it before it becomes an issue. So that's something we'll continue to work on. Upgrade the HVAC server. That's the computer server that runs all the controls for the heating. So we had to upgrade it because it was becoming obsolete, and we took care of that, and that project is done. And then this one that's hanging around from 2 years ago is the AES bathroom renovation. That is when we had thought we were going to have to replace a pipe in the elementary school, but we were able to do a less expensive fix, and so that article is just sitting out there. So that's something that we have to work with the town either on taking that money, and hopefully we can't use it for anything else unless we redo an article. So that's something we'll have to work with them on. So all told, total capital requests approved at last year's town meeting is $230,000. We carried over about $67,000 from the previous year. We've spent $58,400, so we have available $238,000 for those specific projects that I mentioned. I wanna really state that clearly, because it's not like we have $240,000 to do whatever we want with. It has to be specific to those projects. So we'll continue on with that.
Can I ask one question?
Yep.
When are capital requests due for budget time starting to come around?
We have a department head meeting with the town on Thursday, so I'm hoping that information is going to be given to us then. I haven't received any information regarding any deadlines from the town yet.
Okay.
But
And
hopefully
you'll
on
bring-
Thursday.
We're going to have a subcommittee meeting, though.
Right, right.
The school department, we'll be planning that
Perfect.
in short order, yep.
I'm just thinking of timeframes, and I'm knowing that it should be time to start approving what we're
Yes,
thinking
yep.
for capital projects.
So our big one is, of course, the roof. So that's been somewhat approved, but that's where we're gonna be concentrating a lot of our efforts on. We still do have to do some work here. So again, it's a matter of capacity, and as we heard with the curriculum, of someone who's kind of pulling that all together. And we're lacking that person right now, so, we hope to, with a facilities director, so we hope to have that person hired pretty soon to help coordinate all this work and facilitate all this work. The last article that we have is a special education stabilization. Approved at town meeting this year was $50,000. They had approved $100,000 the previous year, which we have not had to use. So right now there's a balance of $150,000, and that's there. It's a savings account, and really, in simple terms, that's there. Say we do have a student that moves into town that has very, very high needs and moves in, and that hadn't been budgeted for because we weren't aware of the student. We have that money there to use just for that purpose. So that's good.
Excuse me, Kristen, I had a question. Regarding the roof for the town meeting in May, that we have to have it ready for it, correct? It was over $500,000. Is that what we're talking about? How we have to keep everything
Right
in order?
now, we have right now it's outstanding that we have the contract with the designer and the project manager. The project manager is overseeing from the MSBA the entire project. The designer is designing it. So until we have those documents ready from them, we don't know the cost. We have some estimates, but if all goes according to plan, right now we need those contracts signed by the town so that work can begin with those folks. And if all goes according to plan, we get on the board meeting of the MSBA, the Mass School Building Authority, where we would hopefully finally be approved for funding. We're still in the pipeline. We've made it through all the hurdles so far. That's the final step, and then you can go to town meeting to get the funds appropriated. Once the funds are appropriated, then we can send out the IFB, which will be designed by the architect and overseen, by us here at the school department and the owner's project manager. That goes out, so we've got a really tight time frame. So it's
May,
really
right?
for May town meeting,
Okay.
right? And that has to be, the IFB has to go out,
Yeah, so
and
that's what I'm trying to
contractors
get
have
to.
to bid. Exactly. So right now, like I
Town is
said,
aware.
That's what I'm,
So
that's
where
what
is
my
it?
concern
Doesn't
is that
sound like
we're
we're
not
gonna make
gonna have the,
So where is it stuck right now, waiting on signatures
the contracts are waiting on signatures, yes.
at the town?
So,
so we'll have an update next meeting on,
Yes.
on where we are on that? Okay.
And I do remember that from my past experience, that once we get the funding from them, so you go through all this work and you spend
Right.
your money in hopes that you're gonna do all of this, and then you hope that it you do. I'm
Right.
just being honest, you hope it passes. You hope that we spend this money and we get the design and we get everything together, and then MSBA says, okay, we're gonna give you this portion of money, and then we hope the town will come together and approve the project. Because if we don't come up with the funding, then it's off the table.
Well, that's my concern and why I'm bringing it up at the meeting tonight, is just let the public know that this is coming up, so this
Yeah,
won't
and
be
it's
some
not
sort of
again,
shock.
right, and it's right, so once the MSBA says, here you go, we're gonna approve, yes, you pass, yes, your roof's in bad enough shape that we're willing to help give you money for it. We, as the town of Acushnet, have to make a vote to
Right, pull it
come up with
together.
them, to pull the money together, so.
So, the roof will be funded by the state, by the MSBA at 57%.
Right.
So it would really be a shame if, the town didn't take advantage of this opportunity because the roof needs to be fixed. And if someone else is gonna pay more than half of it, then, I think that's a pretty good deal. Roofs are
Absolutely.
expensive. This is next door is a big building, it's a big section of the building, but nevertheless, if we don't take care of the roof, then how can we take care of everything inside the building if we have a bad roof?
We had,
So-
remember last year, we had people saying that the classrooms, no offense, but the classrooms were leaking, I heard, right? People
Yep,
were
yeah,
complaining
we
that
do have,
waters
it's
were dripping
ongoing.
in buckets at certain
Right.
points before we could
It
fix
is
it, so.
it is ongoing, and we do have some, as recently as the past couple of weeks, we had some part of the roof leaking. So the money that we have spent from the roof article has been on the roofers to come and do patching,
Okay.
so.
So please let us know if there's anything we can do to expedite anything.
I think public
We'll try.
knowledge of just letting people know every meeting, that this is coming up the pipeline and that we'll need them at town meeting to support us.
Yeah, and
No,
letting
it's important.
the selectmen and the town know how important this is, that we need their support. Finance committee out there, we're gonna need their support. It's,
And I know there's been ongoing communication between us, our business manager, and the town administrator regarding this project.
okay.
Thank you.
We'll cross our fingers.
All right, so next, school lunch, again, it's doing well. Our lunches, compared to last year, are down slightly, but every month they come up. And we closed the month at the end of December with a profit. And year-to-date, we have a small deficit, but, as we go throughout the year and get our reimbursements in, we're not really concerned about the school lunch program. They continue to do well and are well-run, well-staffed, and it's a great program that we have, so we don't worry too much about that. Facilities, as you're aware, our Director of Facilities resigned from his position. He's remaining with the town as a full-time firefighter, so we're lucky to have him close by. In fact, he came here and helped us out today with something to do with the heating system, so we're lucky to still have him, who's ready and available and willing to come and help Mr. Oliver and myself out as we address some problems that have been coming up with the heating system. It's normal, it's natural. The heating system is old, the boilers are older, so we know every year we're gonna have some issues with the components of the heating system. So we're just addressing them as they come, and we just ask for people's patience. I know that Chris is monitoring the temperatures on the heating control system that I mentioned, so we can see what the temperatures are like in the classrooms, and that allows us to address them. So in the meantime, hopefully we'll have this position filled as soon as possible, but we are working together to try to just make sure that everybody is as comfortable in the classrooms as possible, and I think we achieved that over the past couple of days, hopefully. So the next thing is the interviews will start tomorrow. We are interviewing people, a screening committee, and then we'll narrow it down to a few finalists to be interviewed, to have a second interview. So we hope that we have someone on board by the time we have the second interview, and if we find somebody that we want, they accept the job, of course, have to give some notice, thinking the earliest would be mid-February that we'll have someone on board. So that's a while to be without this critical position, but again, with the help of everybody, our custodians have been great in responding to things, and principals and everybody in the buildings have been helpful to really help us out. Just today on the radio, someone was leaving and they called out to the custodians to say, hey, the alarm's going on the boiler. The custodian took care of it. So it's really everyone working together that's really, helping us out. So with that, so hopefully at the next meeting, I'll have an update on that position. Good news on the big toy. So it's if you've noticed, I hope you have, it's all set. It's been completed except for the cargo net. And we didn't know if that would be completed in the winter time anyways, because there was some question as to whether they'd be able to get underground if the ground was frozen, or once they did that, how much cement they'd have to go through. They might need to take some more time to get through the cement. Well, when the installer came, he did notice that the top rail for the cargo net really did need to be replaced. The estimator that came out didn't include that, so we had to order that part. But everything but for the cargo net has been replaced. So we've got a quote, and that's coming in the spring. So the big toy right now has improved surfacing, more and safer, better surfacing, 6 new swings with new hardware, 2 new adaptive swings, a new wishbone slide, and a new suspension bridge. And we replaced some hardware that was on the log roll and some hand grips on the climbing wall. So we are almost as good as new with the big toy. So that's the news of the night for facilities.
Nice.
Boilers. So as I mentioned, we're monitoring the boilers closely. They're about 18 years old. So every year we get more and more calls for service that we need. And as we mentioned, we do need to think about future replacement. They're eligible for MSBA funding if they're 25 years or older. Prior to the last couple of years, their threshold used to be 20, but they've had to change that based on funding and based on the number of requests that they're beginning to see. So they only have a finite amount of money, so they're saying, don't bother to submit an application with us, folks, unless your boilers are 25 years or older. So ours are about 18 years old. We've got some years to go. Hopefully, we can maintain them in working order until we can make application to the MSBA for funding. Because as I said, they're reimbursing us for the roof at actually 57.74%. So it really behooves us to take advantage of this program if and when we are eligible. So, right now we just have to continue to keep a close eye and keep making fixes when we need to. Next thing is we talked about the roof. We just have the contract out, like I said, from the owner's project manager. That's awaiting approval of the contract by the town. We are also awaiting the design proposal. I'm told by the OPM that it just required a few tweaks, so once that comes, that will also require approval by the town. The town is the contract holder for these, so that's why, it's not done here at our level. So that's why it's at the next level. So again, we need to commit the funds for the OPM and the designer services during what was called right now the schematic design phase. So they're designing the roof and what that looks like. I was told by the previous town administrator that we can use the roof maintenance funds to pay for that. And again, based on the estimate that the OPM gave me just the other day, it looks like we're going to fall a little short on that. But we do have some money in the school building revolvings. And again, that's what that's there for emergencies, for contingencies. So that's what we would be using that for, to keep the project going. Because if these folks here are doing all this work, we have to pay them. They're not going to be doing any work, all this work, for future payment in the summer. Once we get approved by town, they need to be paid now, and that's why they required us to commit to a certain level of funding when we first made application. Hopefully, I'm going to have more detailed information at our next meeting. So finally, I have in facilities, I just have one more thing. I know I wanted to take a look at something that had been discussed, in the past several months about whether we contract out for certain facilities services. And I know there's been some discussion. There was some mention of it at off-site meetings. So I thought, well, let me take a look at these concerns and see how much and what for we spend for any outside, specifically landscaping, electric, and plumbing, because that's what we get the questions on and the concerns on. So what I did is I looked at the expense ledgers for all of our maintenance and repair accounts. These would be at the elementary school, the middle school, the district-wide budget, and any funds that we spent out of school building revolving to pay for any of these outside services. And I pulled the ledgers for the last 3 years. So in your packet, you have a summary of, in total, what's been spent for plumbing, electrical, and landscaping. So for example, In 2018, for plumbing, a total of $1,300 was spent for some jobs throughout the district, throughout the elementary school and middle school. Things like repairing toilets and broken faucets, supply lines, leaking bubblers. In 2019, a total of 5,600, but 4,200 of that was to replace all of the bubblers across the district. So really, again, in 2019, only $1,400 was spent on an outside plumbing contractor. Year to date in 2020, $650. Electrical, 2018, we spent about $473 to wire a new AC unit in the server room. So when we replaced the air conditioning unit, we need an electrician to come in and wire it. 2019, we spent a total of $2,400, but $1,750 of that, $1,750, was for the new parking lot light poles. So really on an outside job that we, outside of that big job, it was about $660 for electrical. Landscaping, every year we've spent some funds with a landscaper to come in and trim, edge, weed, plant, and mulch the beds to beautify the campus for the opening of school. Sometimes that might involve removing trees. So each year we spent between $1,500 and about $3,200. The most was last year, $3,200, because we had some trees removed. 2018 was $1,400, and this year was $3,000, just a little over. So in total, that represents 173 hours of labor. So that's 173 hours of labor that we otherwise would have had to commit our own people to do. So, I thought that was interesting to take a look at. I did want to do that because I know that's been something that's been of concern at some points. So as you can see, minimal amounts have been spent on these outside vendors. In fact, last year, the sum of these payments represented only 6% of the total that we spent for maintenance on buildings and grounds. Some might wonder why we do this, and simply the jobs might require a licensed plumber or a licensed electrician. They might be too large for one person to handle themselves, or they might require equipment that we don't have. For example, the landscaping, to haul in all that mulch, one F-250 truckload at a time, or to have deliveries over time when we have, an outside landscaper with bigger equipment that can get that work done in a shorter amount of time with a larger crew. So again, like I said, the installation of the new bubblers that cost $4,200, or the parking lot light poles that was $1,750. That might involve work that we just don't have the number of people to do, or the license to do, or any of the equipment. So as you can see, we didn't sub out any smaller general electrical work orders in the past couple of years. And like I said, for landscaping, that was 173 man-hours, using a lot of heavy equipment that we don't have. Unfortunately, as we saw with Dr. Roy, with some of the, with the teachers being the one person in their grade not able to collaborate, we just have one person who's doing this, so it makes it difficult, to get done what is needed and what's expected. So, again, like we contract out for other things, we do sometimes need to contract out for facilities. So I thought it important to take a look at that, because I know that that's been, discussed, and especially with, looking for a new director of facilities, I just wanted to make it clear, what we are spending our money for, how much, and what for, and why. So I thought that was interesting to bring during the facilities report tonight. So finally, Alice, we're continuing in our efforts to implement Alice at the school department. Officer Derek Cathcart is leading this effort. As you know, Alice is an acronym for alert, lockdown, inform, counter, and evacuate. So what we're trying to do is empower individuals, whether it be staff, whether it be students, anyone, to participate in their own survival using some proactive response options. So it's options that we're all given to help in the event of an intruder. So it's skills that skills that you can use anywhere, and certainly we hope we never have to use them, but we are preparing our students and staff in the event that we do. So, so far this year, we've had some meetings of the School Safety Committee where we've planned our trainings. We'll continue to do that. We have one this week to review our parent information night that we held last week. Again, like I said, we did have that parent information night. It was attended by approximately 35 to 40 parents and guardians. And they were presented by Officer Cathcart with what we're doing, why we're doing it, what the plan is going forward. We also purchased a family and community awareness tool from the Alice Training Institute. So that's a link on our website that families and community members can go and look at to see what is Alice, what we're doing, how we're preparing our students, how we're preparing our teachers to be able to instruct the students. So it's a real good tool that we have. And again, like I said, our next event is the School Safety Committee meeting this week, where we'll kind of take a look at that training that we had and see what the next step is. So that, like I said, the Family and Community Awareness module is a companion piece to our basic certification training that we purchased last year to help train the staff. We asked all staff members to review that and redo it to refresh it, since it has been, almost a year since we first rolled it out. So we wanted that current in people's minds. And again, our new module is going to allow our families to view. It's an online video, and it's going to introduce them to Alice, and how their children are learning and how the teachers are being prepared for any event, and learn, how to respond to an event if it happens, and how to talk to children about the training they're going to be receiving. So like I said, we had that parent information night last week.
Excuse me, Krista,
Yes.
can I just interject there? So I did attend the Alice training night, and I just want to thank, the district as a whole for communicating we got text that this meeting was happening. Some people got flyers. It was an email, and I'm not sure if there was a phone call as well, but to say, to give parents the information, it was done very well, so thank you for that.
I believe that the school principal sent out information in at least one, if not more, of their FYIs out to the parents.
Yeah.
It was on our website. I believe it was on Twitter.
I got a text to check my
You
email.
got a text to
so
check your
that's-
email, and then an email. It was on Facebook. I think the PTO did some advertising for us. So we really tried our best to inform people in every manner of communication that we have, that we were able to do so. But it was a good night. There was some questions that were answered. Certainly people have concerns, and that was one of the reasons why we wanted to have the information night, to let parents know this is coming. We are going to start to train the students. We don't want to do it without anyone knowing what we're doing, how we're doing it, why we're doing it. One thing that Officer Cathcart impressed is that we're not going to have a surprise drill, like all of a sudden it's a surprise, it's a fire drill. That's not going to happen. It's going to be planned. It will be announced, at least to start. Nothing will come as a surprise. So we wanted to make sure that families understood that the school department is committed to a safe learning environment. And again, instruction will be age and ability appropriate. There's some materials that we are going to be purchasing to help in the classrooms. Officer Cathcart talked about some of those things, and he had examples of them. And we're going to continue to train our staff and then roll out the student training. Again, funding from Alice.
I'm not sure I understand.
Siri's talking to me. She doesn't understand Alice, so clearly we need to do a better job. So, anyways, funding, I guess Siri doesn't understand funding. Funding is coming from our Title IV grant. It's a federal grant that we receive from the Department of Education. All schools most likely receive it. Last year was the first year we received it. And the grant is creating safe, healthy, and supportive, high-quality education learning environment for all. So there was some question at our parent information night, how are we paying for this, and why aren't we doing more? Why don't we have, for example, more officers, or why don't we have, for example, bulletproof glass? I just want people to understand that this grant last year, we received about $5,000. So last year we used it to start our Alice training. And this year we received $10,000. There is a required share to private schools. That's per federal regulations. So all of our federal grants, we are required to share with any private schools in the area. So once they get their portion, ours is, this year we had to net about 400, I think, to the private schools. So we still do have a decent amount of money. We received 95.89 net of the required share. So we're using that to purchase the family and community awareness module. That's going to be helpful for our families. And also we need to continue with our ALICE training, the basic certification training with that. And we've used the funds to do any curriculum that we'll be purchasing for ALICE. And that also goes toward, we've sent a lot of staff to technology conferences this year, also some behavioral, some social emotional, so that ties into what Dr. Bailey was talking about, so we can use those funds for that. But, you know, again, it's $10,000. It's a decent amount of money. It's a start, and we're using it the best that we can. But just be assured that we're continuing in our efforts to prepare students in the event that, you know, there is an intruder, and it is skills that are, you know, good for everybody to have anywhere you go. So that's the ALICE update. Anybody have any questions?
No? Any questions for Mrs. Flynn? No? Okay, well, thank you very much. All right, school committee member reports. Does anyone have anything? Nope. We do not need to go into executive session. Oh, well, we have the Reed's Collaborative Annual Report in our packet.
I just want to say the
Yeah.
biggest thing on the board of directors for Reed's, and they're still looking at their building project. Now I think they're leaning more towards renting a space versus building, finding an existing site.
Okay.
But it will impact tuition. We're estimating that tuitions will go up because of their building project. So again, that to me is the biggest takeaway, but you certainly can read through their report. The annual report includes everything, but that's the biggest piece for me.
Yeah, the
Price jump.
tuitions last year, they went up about 8 to 9% when we usually, you know, when we do the budget, we don't sometimes have the rates for all of our out of districts. So we'll estimate anywhere between a 3 and a 5% increase to be on a safe side. And this year, when we did receive the final numbers, I believe it was about an 8 or 9% in the annual tuition. And there was also a small, but still, building fee to start their work. So so that's something that we need to be prepared for any of our out of district tuitions at Reed's.
Okay, thank you.
I do have one thing to mention. The little toy article that I've been working on is, I have a deadline. I have my own personal deadline, and then you have the town's deadline. So I am working on that right now. I will be meeting with Kristen hopefully sometime either later this week or next week, and I'll be bringing it to the PTO as well. So we'll have more information about that and at the next meeting. But it should be submitted this month.
Okay. Good. Yes, thank you.
We're busy in Acushnet.
We are, I know. We still have soccer going on as well, right, Sue?
Oh, yeah.
Soccer contracts and.
Yeah.
All right, so if we don't have anything else, I will take a motion to adjourn. Our next meeting is Tuesday, February 11th at 5:30. I hope you all can make it. Can I have a motion to adjourn?
Motion?
Second?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All right, thank you.